When you think of a mentally ill character, who is the first that comes to your mind? The Joker? He is insane, so it makes sense that he has multiple mental illnesses like psychopathy, MPD, and so on. Or maybe you think of the Netflix show Mindhunters and the infamous Edmund Kemper. For me though, it is a bit different. There is this anime that always comes to mind when I'm talking about mental health. Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei. If you've ever watched it, you know Nozomu Itoshiki is the undisputed king of overreactions. The show revolves around Nozomu, a high school teacher who is always pessimistic to the point where even the smallest inconvenience sends him spiraling into despair. He's constantly depressed and often resorts to dramatic and sometimes absurd attempts to end his own life. It is all played for laughs in a very dark, satirical way. The anime uses these over-the-top scenarios to critique various aspects of Japanese society, from cultural norms to the pressure of modern life. But here's the thing. While Nozomu's breakdowns are exaggerated for comedic effect, they also hint at something very real. How even seemingly minor triggers can feel utterly overwhelming when you're struggling with mental health. What's more, Nozomu's students each represent different societal and psychological issues, from extreme anxiety to delusions and obsessive behaviors. It is a dark comedy, but it cleverly highlights how these issues are more common than we might think, even if they are usually kept beneath the surface in real life. Today we're diving into how video games tackle said mental health and its illnesses. Sometimes it's with grace, while at the other times it's with the subtlety of a breaking through a window. Let's take a look at the good, the bad, and the really weird ways game depicts mental disorders. Spoiler, it will get weird. Video games are a powerful medium of storytelling and immersion. They have increasingly taken on the challenge of depicting mental disorders with nuance and empathy. But how well do these games represent the realities of mental illnesses, and what impact do they have on players and the broader conversation about mental health? In the past, when we tried to connect some sort of mental illness with gaming, it would most likely be in horror games. If there is one game that really leans into the mental illness for spooky atmosphere trope, without much depth, it's Hunting Ground, a game released in 2005 on PS2 by Capcom. In this game we play as a young woman, Fiona, who wakes up in the basement of a castle. It doesn't take long for the player to understand what his role in this game is: run. As the first human that she encounters, Debilitas is shown to play with a doll. If violently throwing a doll on the ground can be considered playing. After he spots Fiona, he mistakes her for a big doll and wants to hug her, which doesn't end up well. Although we don't see what happens when he catches us, we can only imagine. Just listen. His purpose in the overall story is to be a big, mentally unstable, childlike man trying to have his way with the player, which in its own can be a bit scary, but the same effect could be achieved with any type of enemy. Imagine a scary looking werewolf or Wendigo is chasing you and wants to eat you. You can get almost the same end result as with Debilitas, and please don't give me that "but the game is set in reality" excuse. You know it's not true if you've played the game or watched the gameplay. Now, not all games depict mental illness like this. As I said earlier, some games take a completely different approach, especially in the later years. The study Depiction of Mental Illness and Psychiatry in Popular Video Games over the last 20 years, psychiatrists took a look at 57 games that included some sort of representation of mental illnesses or its symptoms, from which 75% of the games depicted them as something negative, 13 games were shown as neutral, and 1 game was depicting mental illness as something positive, which was in Watch Dogs 2, where a character is diagnosed with a highly functional autism, meaning that even though he has autistic tendencies, he is still able to somewhat properly function in society, Or we can say he's on the lower side of autistic spectrum. Now, even though we didn't talk about a game with this type of illness yet, according to this study, around 40% of games that have some sort of mental illness in it use a schizophrenia or something very similar. One of such games is Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. Unlike most, if not all of the older games, this game did its research on mental illness and what it's like to have one. One more disclaimer before we move on. Now, I will not be spoiling the end of this game as it's irrelevant to this video, but it will contain some sort of spoilers as it is needed, so if you didn't play the game, what are you waiting for? Go and play it, it's amazing. With that being said, let's continue. This game takes mental health seriously. Like, sit down with a neuroscientist seriously. I mean, literally. Senua, our main character, is dealing with psychosis. Now, as a professor of health neuroscience of Cambridge University who helped with the development of the game, Paul Fletcher says, psychosis is not a diagnosis, although it is associated with medical or psychiatric condition. At its core, psychosis consists from delusions, hallucinations, and thought disorder, among many others. And the game does an incredible job of depicting you Senua's world. How she sees things differently than others. You'll hear voices, see things that aren't there, and generally start questioning your own sanity. You know, the usual Tuesday night. But seriously, it's a game that makes you walk a mile in the shoes of someone with a very different reality. A really real reality, at least for them. It depicts how even the most mundane things can be really hard for someone. Like, imagine you are going out of your room and you hear stuff like this.
He knows she's getting closer.
He can feel her coming closer.
They're watching. She's getting closer.
They're watching.
The head.
They're watching.
They're watching. They're watching.
This is a journey deep into darkness.
They're watching. They know you're here.
There will be no more stories after this one.
While in some games, mental health and illness intertwined with human psyche are about the bad, the ugly, and so on, Celeste is that one game that comes to my mind when I think about overcoming said problems. Madeline, a not-so-cheerful girl, comes to Mount Celeste to try to overcome her struggles. Climbing the mountain is a metaphor for overcoming her inner struggles, anxiety and depression. But as you think you are making progress, bam, you fall deeper and deeper, kind of like when you are struggling with your own sanity. Madeline is not just battling the mountain, but her inner demons and fears as well, quite literally. The game is relatively hard, kind of like getting out of the bed in the morning, but that is part of the charm of the game. In a sense, when you overcome an obstacle you couldn't before, it has a sense of accomplishment, especially because the game is not holding your hand. Like you did better on a test in school, not because the teacher gave you an easier test than before, or because you cheated, but because you studied, struggled and did better. Even if the change in the score is minimal, you made a progress, and that is all that matters to you because you know you can do better next time. That is how it feels to play and beat Celeste. Also, the minigame where you have to hold the feather is a real technique people use to get out of panic attack, which is a nice touch to the whole game as it is about self-healing through trial and error. But as in the game, it's not gonna work all the time. If that was all it took for people to overcome said problems, we'd all just climb a metaphorical mountain and call it a day. Unfortunately, life doesn't have a retry button. But Celeste reminds us that progress, no matter how small, is still a progress. It's about falling, getting back up, and if you're lucky, reaching that summit, even if you take a few detours along the way. While most games only sprinkle in mental health themes alongside the usual gameplay or use them as a narrative drive point, there is one game that does it differently. Unlike Celeste with its colorful art style or Hellblade with action combat, Depression Quest is really how would you say it? Boring? In a way, yes, it is a text-based game which were popular in 70s and 80s. The game starts with this quote: "Its emotional character is probably mostly indescribable except as a sort of double bind in which any/all of the alternatives we associate with human agency, sitting or standing, doing or resting, speaking or keeping silent, living or dying, are not just unpleasant, but literally horrible." By David Foster Wallace. The whole game consists of reading what you did or didn't do in the day or at a certain occasion, while at some point you can choose what to do or how to react to a situation. The problem is that because of your deteriorating mental state, you can't choose some of the options. You know the option is there to just tell your mom how you're feeling like crap, but you can't. Not because it's not an option, but just because you can't. I think this game has the most realistic depiction of how people with severe depression view the world. Now, these games are not only meant to make you cry, laugh, or entertain. While, yes, it's true that a game should be entertaining enough for you to be able to get to the end, games in general can also be used as a powerful tool in development of human nature. There is this study from 2019 published in African Journal of Disability, where scientists try to figure out if games have effect on increasing empathy of its players. Now, just to clarify, this study used only one game that was specifically made with the intention of increasing one's empathy level. The study group was divided into 3 groups. The first group received information on reacting in sensitive and responsive way. Another group played this set game, The World of Empa, and the last group got nothing. They wanted to know if playing games like this one can increase one's empathy, and wouldn't you know it, but they did. Unlike the group that didn't do anything, both the reading group and the gaming group increased their EQ, albeit slightly over time. But let's be real, depicting mental disorders in games is tricky. Developers have to walk a fine line between being accurate and not accidentally reinforcing stereotypes. Plus, there's the risk that someone could play these games and end up feeling worse. It's like cooking with really spicy peppers. You got to know what you're doing or someone's going to get burned. With that being said, video games as a medium is doing a better job than ever at representing mental disorders and struggles that come with it. But it's not always easy to do a good job at it. Whether they are making sure every little thing is realistic like Hellblade, well, in a sense, as the game is a fantasy genre, or going for something more indirect and abstract like Celeste. These games are opening up conversations in our community, and if video game can make you think about your mental health as well as those around you, then that is a win in my eyes. But as there are games that try to evoke sympathy for these characters, there are those that take a bit of a different road. Now is a good time to talk about the really weird games in my opinion. Needy Streamer Overload is a game where you play as P-chan, though what the P stands for I'll leave to your imagination. You're tasked with managing Ame-chan, an aspiring streamer with a virtual persona called OMG Kawaii Angel. Now, if you're thinking this sounds like a typical streamer management sim, think again. First off, the game's graphics might be highly realistic, but let's be real, this is pure fantasy. I mean, you're actually in a relationship with Ame-chan. Yeah, right, as if that's going to happen in real life. And second, she's dead set on getting 1 million subscribers in just a month. Yeah, if only it were that easy, huh? The game revolves around balancing 3 key meters for Ame-chan: stress, affection, and brace yourselves, mental darkness. Yep, we're diving deep into the mental health trenches here. And with 27 different endings, let me tell you, none of them are particularly happy. You might think, okay, I'll just keep her affection high, stress low, and mental darkness at bay. Easy, right? Wrong. Do that and Amechan might just leave you for another guy. Help her achieve her dreams, depending on various other stats, but usually, nope, that's not going to end well either. Ironically, the so-called good ending requires you to push her stress past the breaking point, forcing her into stuff like bathtub streams and ASMR, while you coldly ignore her messages. The game takes a dark twist, showing how the pressures of internet fame can push someone to the edge, and how unhealthy dependency can spiral into something truly disturbing. But seriously, that soundtrack. "10 out of 10 game. Recommend it all the way." Now, a few final words from me. Please remember, this video is all about sharing something I find fascinating, not making light of the real struggles people face. Mental illness is a serious topic, and if you or someone you know is struggling, there is no shame in seeking help. Games are evolving, and it's exciting to see them take on such complex themes, even if they sometimes stumble along the way. Whether it's handling these topics with sensitivity or taking the more bizarre route like needy streamer overload, they're opening up conversations that need to happen. With that being said, what do you think? Do you have a favorite game that dives deep into mental health, either nailing it or completely missing the mark? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on more deep dives into games that make you think. And who knows, maybe next time we'll explore even weirder territory. Until then, take care, take breaks when you need them, and I'll see you in the next video.